Launch Today is the podcast focused on what it takes to get your new business to $1 million or more in revenue, from marketing tactics to incredible guest interviews. We focus on sharing behind-the-scenes content from masters in their field. If you want to grow your revenue for your startup or business, you don't want to miss today, because joining is a master of growth strategies and a beacon of entrepreneurial wisdom, Rand Fishkin. Rand is founder of SparkToro, also indie game maker Snackbar Studio, author of Lost and Founder, and launched and led Moz, has been at the forefront of digital marketing since 2001, which is a while ago now, and frequent keynote speaker on marketing and entrepreneurship. Rand, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Yeah, my pleasure, Trevor. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So let me hop right into it, because I've got a lot of questions, and I think you've got a lot of good insights to add. First thing is, so you went from Moz.com into SparkToro. SparkToro, for listeners who don't know, is a social listening software that really helps figure out what people are talking about online. I use it. That's what I use it for, right? I've been a subscriber for 2 years now, for a while. And what I use it for is to figure out people who want to buy something, what do they talk about? There's, I think, more uses for it than that. That's my use for it. Let me ask you, like, in a sentence or two, what gets you from SEO, which is a huge, big field, over to what SparkToro does now instead?
Yeah. So a couple of things. One was when I left / was kicked out of my first company, venture backing, that can happen with founders.
Yep.
I had a non-compete, which meant that SEO was off the table for me for many years. I think technically that non-compete is over, but I continue to enjoy the world of audience research a lot. So essentially learning, to your point, right? Learning what people who are in particular audiences and search for things or visit particular websites or have particular job titles or roles or interests. What do they pay attention to? Where can you find them on the web? What do they talk about, listen to, follow, share? What are their interests? What are their demographics? That research was a real pain in the butt for tons of companies that I worked with and advised and invested in, and for Moz itself even. And my co-founder, Casey, and I had this theory that we could, with enough web scale data, initially, to your point, from social sources. So Twitter was our primary data source at launch. Then when it was acquired by the insane new owner,
Our friend Elmo, yes.
no one's friend, but
Fair enough.
We no longer could access that data. And that's not entirely true. We could have kept accessing that data, but most folks who are familiar with Twitter's ecosystem noted that it took a hard turn to the political, not just the sort of alt political world, but also the conversations that used to happen around, hey, there's a big gardening topic in Twitter. That all went away, and all of Twitter became essentially, do we think trans people should be alive? Do we think whatever cryptocurrency Elon is promoting should go up in value? And all of the rest of those niche conversations that our customers really cared about went away. And so we moved to clickstream data, actually, to power the majority of SparkToro. We still use a lot of data from LinkedIn, which is one social network. That's where we get a lot of our demographics and interests and job titles and roles, all that kind of stuff. But clickstream data, we use a provider called Datos, based in New York. They are fantastic. They have a multi-million device panel all over the world and north of 10 million devices. And so they can see every URL that's visited by all these devices. And then essentially what we buy is cross-domain visitation data. So people who do activity X on the web, what other activities do they do in high propensity? And then that's what you in SparkToro. So I've searched for whatever VPs of engineering or interior designers or people who are into drones. You can see they like these YouTube channels, they like these podcasts, they subscribe to these newsletters, they visit these websites, all that kind of stuff.
Awesome. And I find one of the challenges people have these days, and where people come to marketers like me and sources of data like you, is it used to be you'd have a click to a website to a sign up, and you were like, job's done, brother. I can track that. It's not that way anymore. What have you seen change to make attribution so freaking hard?
Trevor, I often wonder if it was ever that way. I think we might have been fooling ourselves. I think we might have been fooling ourselves. I will grant that the internet was simpler for a long time, and the web journeys were far more trackable analytics and privacy policies and government laws and regulations, the way third-party and first-party cookies worked, the way almost every browser let you track almost everything, and almost no one used an ad blocker, which of course removes cookie data. And so because of that, if you go back to 2013 or 14, before all this stuff, ad blockers, privacy laws, regulations, et cetera, multi-device journeys, right? That's another big one that's happened since the advent of the mobile phone.
Yeah, there we go.
If you go back in time to that point, you basically could say, oh, okay, this person who, signed up for a subscription on my website, I know because of their browser cookie and my analytics that they visited my site 7 times in the last year and a half, right? I can see all the way back in time. And I know that first visit came from a link off of Reddit. And I know the second visit came from Slack channel. And I know that the third link came from an email newsletter they signed up for. And I know the fourth link, they signed up for our email newsletter and did it, right? And so I can build this whole model. And now you are lucky if you are able to track anything past 30 days, maybe possibly if you're savvy and you've got people to log in 90 days, and Slack no longer sends referral traffic. Google no longer tells you the keyword that someone came to you for. You can no longer see cross-session which things they visited because they're on multiple devices. If they have an ad blocker, you can't even see the sessions that they've come to you. So there's a million problems with that attribution tracking. And unfortunately, because of the way the first decade and a half worked in digital marketing, way too many executives, CFOs, VPs of finance, even CEOs and founders, way too many people think, I am only going to invest in attributable marketing. And that removes tons of channels that could drive a tremendous amount of value for you.
Yeah. So I think that brings up an interesting question for me, which is, in almost every SparkToro report I ever generate,
my lighting got changed.
I did notice that your light slowly was
Seattle in the winter.
Asparagus to remind my editor. There we go. All right. One thing that I found really interesting and has actually changed some of my behavior is in SparkToro, virtually every single thing I search for, YouTube is always the #1 search engine for everybody.
So social network,
Social network, sorry, exactly. It's the biggest one. And so I started to go, all right, how come I'm always starting on the second or third most popular, I'm either on LinkedIn or on Meta? Why don't we try on YouTube? And so it's harder to make the creative, but if you invest in it, it can work really well to start journeys.
Yeah, I think it really speaks to how marketers need to think about audience research a little bit differently. So one thing that we've historically done is we've said, hey, this platform is popular, therefore I should be there. TikTok came out and people were like, what's your TikTok strategy? I don't know if that's a good idea. If TikTok is uniquely popular with your crowd in your space on your topic that resonates with your audience, and those conversations are really happening on TikTok, great, you should be there. I agree. But if it is just the case that, hey, we target this demographic and about 25% of them use TikTok, that does not mean you should be there, right? That's not a relevant place for your audience. And I would think about YouTube the same way. So yes, YouTube is popular with almost every American. You can see in every research study, it's the #1 network. It's the most visited site behind Google. It has more searches on it than Microsoft's Bing. It's the world's second most popular search engine.
Yeah.
Does that mean that every business should be investing in YouTube? Probably not. Does that mean you should? Maybe. The answer is maybe, and it depends. I think every marketer's answer to everything, every broad question should be, it depends, because it's all about your audience and what you're trying to communicate and where you are going to have the best results, not about whether your audience is in a place or not.
Gotcha. I do think once you know the channel someone is subscribed to and their recent search history, you know everything about their brain anyway. So my search history doesn't speak to the fact that I built the office I work out of. Right? So I do woodworking, but I'm subscribed to a bunch of woodworking channels. So if you wanted to sell me a fancy new saw, You wouldn't find me on search, but you would find me on channel interests. This sort of thing is where this starts to come up, right?
Yeah, and I think one of the interesting things is, if you were to, for example, look in SparkToro for people who search for woodworking, you would find a list of popular YouTube channels.
Yes.
And if, as a savvy marketer, you said to yourself, I think that woodworking, my audience, my content suits itself very well to a video watching audience on YouTube, then you can go through and look at the list of channels and say, all right, how do I get this channel to feature me as a guest or feature my product? Or can I send this YouTuber my product and get them to use it? Could I just buy advertising on those channels, right? Tell Google, hey, guess what, Google? I really want you to put my ads on this YouTube channel.
Somebody.
Could I sponsor their channel, right? Can I have my logo in their background? Can I, whatever it is, right? You come up with here's how I'm going to tactically get myself into this place. But audience research can tell you these are the places you should be in.
Exactly. A lot of CEOs and CFOs and founders still think about, I can only do attributable marketing, and click tracking we've mentioned is pretty crap. How else do you recommend someone look at where do I invest my marketing? And if I can't source attribution for every single sign up?
Yeah. So what we recommend is going back to 20th century style measurement and lift-based measurement. So, Trevor, let's go back in time together. We're working at Ogilvy and Mather, and it's 1965, and Coca-Cola comes to us.
1965, you say? I have. Here's the Nat Geo from 1965.
Oh my God, I love it.
Let's see what the ads looked like back then.
Beautiful. So here we go. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's imagine that you are making, let's say Coca-Cola, right? And so Coca-Cola, one of the most sophisticated advertising and marketing companies on the planet and has been for 100 years. And so they come to our agency and they say, hey, we want to run a new campaign with you. We want you to come up with something creative. And we might say, okay, great. We believe that there's this emerging demographic on the West Coast that has not brought Coca-Cola into their daily consumption habits. And so we're going to run a series of billboards, and we're going to run them in 4 cities that are extremely similar to each other. One's San Francisco, one's Oakland, one's, Seattle and Portland. And these cities are approximately same size, similar demographic makeups, all this kind of stuff. And so we're going to run 4 different billboards in each city, and we're going to see which one results in the largest lift in same-store sales within a 50-mile radius over the next 6 months. That's a pretty good technique. It worked very well. And then once they see which one works best, great, roll that out to the other 3 cities. Did the lift look similar to the way it looked in the city that won? Great, roll it out to the whole West Coast. That's our billboard campaign, creative done. Next year, we'll come up with a new plan and new idea. You can do the same thing with digital marketing. You absolutely can. And I are constantly doing a lot of content investments that, for example, short form video, images, research reports, examples of how people use SparkToro. We'll use case studies, and then we will promote them across channels. We'll run webinars, and we see how all of these things result in lift for us. And lift for us is searches for our brand, right? So a number of people who search SparkToro in Google, visits to our website, especially our homepage and product page, signups, number of free signups, retention and use of the product. As those things show lift, we look at the new things that we've tried and been like, okay, that did not work. We did not see any lift. That did work. We saw lift. Right? And so we have our marketing program that's standard, and then we try experiments every month. And the experiments that work, those are the ones we keep with. One of the ones that works extremely well that we've discovered is short form video on social networks. Incredible, especially 0-click short form content video. So this would be me making a video. If you're watching this podcast on the screen right over here, like you'll see my face on one side, you'll see the screen over here with the product. I'll show off something and explain something. That'll generally be under 3 minutes, sometimes as short as 40 seconds. That'll go to LinkedIn, Threads, Blue Sky, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. We'll put it up on all those networks. We will see a large number of impressions from those, especially if the video is compelling. And then that results in lots of people trying the free version of SparkToro and some of them signing up for the paid version. And people who have already paid for SparkToro trying that thing that I showed off inside their paid account.
Nice. That is, I'm in many ways fundamentally a performance marketer. I'm always like, if I know I can get the eyeballs to do what I want if I pay for them. And one of my favorite tactics right now is organic content on YouTube Shorts or Instagram promoted to your buyer, right? Zero-click content. It's not, hey, buy,
Right.
rather, let me answer a question I know you have.
Yeah, because Instagram, there's no link, right? YouTube, the link is hidden in the read more. Like nobody's clicking those, but it doesn't matter because they are hearing about your brand. They're learning about what you do, your product, your service, your company. And that brand impression, right? Getting someone to watch a 30-second ad, if you think about 1965 marketing, they used to cost millions of dollars to get your ad on television in front of 99% of the wrong buyers and 1% of the right ones.
Yes.
And now with digital, if you are willing to sacrifice the click attribution, the traffic attribution, you can achieve the same results for pennies.
Exactly. And one thing I have learned is if you build trust with people through YouTube Shorts, I have a ridiculous 15-minute long pre-roll ad that 60% of people watch all the way to the end because they've seen my face a half dozen times first. And you don't have this mustache anymore. And I was very sad when you shaved it. This mustache, people now, they must think I'm you. They're like, oh, I remember that guy. And his content has always taught me something. So I'll watch past the 30-second mark. And if I get them past there, now I can slowly pull them along through the journey of this entire ridiculous video.
Incredible.
And then I get about every 20 to 30 impressions, somebody goes to my website and books a call.
Wow.
And so I only do 200 impressions a month, right? This is a very narrow audience retargeted video, but it's really high performance. So that can be once you build trust. And trust, now is this attributable? Can I show you from the first video you got to then my ad? You think, no. But I know when I invest more in promoting these videos to the right people, that I get more watch time on my long commercial. And that watch time from my long commercial, I see it drives folks to my website. So it all daisy chains together if you can make some assumptions on attribution. You've got to have a little bit of instinct on what's working.
Yeah, absolutely. Fascinating, by the way. Fascinating that works. I do think this speaks to the power of brand recognition, familiarity, and trust. Yeah. You say like people know your face because they've seen you and also your voice. Your voice is very compelling and also very unique.
Thank you.
And I think I didn't mean it as a compliment, although it is a compliment, but because it's memorable. And so you've created this sort of like iconic brand as a package, like it's you. And therefore people hear, see you, and they're like, oh, I know that guy. He said smart stuff before. I trust him. I remember him. And so you can get that 15-minute watch time, though. That's incredible. Like, honestly, mind-blowing. That's
ludicrous. I kept making the commercial longer and people kept watching all the way to the end. And so I'm like, I'm just going to leave it at 15 minutes. I have nothing more to say at this point.
Wow.
It's basically, if you watch this video, you've seen my entire sales pitch.
Yeah.
So then it's just, hey, you saw the video. How do I help?
Yeah. So I've heard about this I was talking to someone about advertising on Reddit, which can be the click-through rates on Reddit are very low. The cost per conversion can be quite high. But I was talking to someone who does this in the indie video game world, which my other company, Snackbar Studio, is making an indie game. And they were saying essentially what they saw is similarly a lift-based measurement results, right? Lift-based campaign. So they ran the ad on Reddit, and then they saw that more people on Steam viewed their game.
Oh, interesting.
Bought their game and gave their game good reviews. And they assumed that the attribution was because they had seen the visuals of the game over and over in their Reddit feeds. And so essentially these people had become familiar with the game. They had already bought into the idea that they liked it. They had never clicked the Reddit ad, but because they had seen it so many times, it resonated when it came up in their Steam recommendations or their Steam homepage. They bought it. Ta-da.
Yes. And then I have, for my wife, this Christmas, I'm buying Christmas gifts. I saw ads maybe a dozen times for a sleep mask. Never once clicked on them. But I went and searched for it, saw the ad. Of course, I clicked on the Google ad result because it's the top one, right?
Right.
So they're going to say it was a Google search ad that brought them the traffic, but actually it was 12 Facebook ads that did it.
Yes, exactly right. And I want to be clear. I think two things are happening. One, that type of branding really works. And also, I think that display advertising, retargeting, Google search ads, a lot of big tech advertising overall is taking credit for sales that would have happened anyway.
Very possibly.
Right?
Yes.
So this Google search ad that you saw at the top, if the organic result below that, or the organic result below that one was to the same place, right? To the right place and the right sleep mask, you would have clicked that if the ad wasn't there.
Uh-huh.
And so that advertiser, the sleep mask company, is paying Google for the privilege of knowing which keyword you search for and nothing else.
And they're paying the digital rent that their competitor doesn't get that spot instead.
That's exactly right. It's essentially, it's like a mafia situation, right? Fat Tony is coming to your shop and he's, yo, that's a nice brand you got there. It'd be a shame if someone were to outrank you for that, right? And that is Google's business model with 44% of all searches are branded. I just published this research last night. 44% of all Google searches are for an existing brand. Someone already knows what brand they want, right? And they're searching for that exact thing. That's massive, right? That's tens of billions of searches a day. And those branded ads, right? Those ads for brand, that space up there is, it's blackmail that you have to pay to Google.
That's, what would that be? That's $20 billion worth of Google's ad revenue would go away.
That's assuming that it's evenly distributed. My guess would be that it's not.
They're like, if they're forced to serve the actual business, they would, because that's 44% of their revenue. We did about 50 billion, right? So I'm fudging the math because I'm bad at it. 22 billion, something like just goes away.
Assuming that it's evenly distributed, but probably it's not.
Of course,
My guess is that brand advertising on branded searches is a majority of Google's ad revenue, and unbranded searches, even though there are more advertisers per individual search, because those searches are informational more so than transactional. Nobody's going to bid on how old is Paul Rudd.
Except they do by mistake. That's the thing, is you run a broad match ad by mistake and you discover that you got click traffic from how old is Paul Rudd, and you're like, what the frick?
Yes.
I'm advertising shoes.
Google.
Yes.
No, the machine learning system, or now they're calling it AI powered, is pretty good at this point. But if you're not regularly checking your ads for both fraud and the appearance of your ads in places where they shouldn't be, you are almost certainly getting overcharged. And it's nearly a full-time job to just audit the digital advertising giants.
Yes, it goes nuts. You've experimented a while back across 16 different social platforms, revealing kind of data gaps in the journey across them. What's an unexpected finding that you think a founder should think about as they're trying to scale up their business?
Just be really careful about that. Founders do all the time is they try and look for analytics to explain what's going on with their business, right? So, hey, new signups are down the last 3 months. What's going on? Let's look in our analytics. Where are our signups coming from on average? Okay, 60% of them came from Google, and 20% came from our ads, 10% came from these places, and 5% from these random websites. And they're like, okay, you know what? I think what's down is, branded Google search. All right, we need to invest more in SEO or search marketing. And that might not be, that might be a terrible takeaway. As you pointed out, we looked into this dark social phenomenon. So dark social is essentially, and dark traffic more broadly, which happens across all sorts of sites, is where a website will send you traffic directly. So it is a click, but in your analytics, it will not show as coming from anywhere because the referral string has been stripped by the provider, right? So Slack, for example, whenever someone clicks on SparkToro.com from like a marketing community's website, we will see zero traffic from Slack. Instead, it will show as direct. And you can see that direct is often 50, 60, 70% of many websites, most websites' traffic. It's not direct. Direct is a lie. What's happening is you are not seeing the actual source that sent you the traffic. And so when you start trying to attribute your marketing to these channels and websites and places where you should invest, you're going to make terrible mistakes. You're going to completely over-index on places that report traffic accurately rather than places that send traffic you care about. That's the fundamental problem.
Yes, I don't remember if it's Jack Welch, but it's what you measure is the output you optimize for. And increasingly, that's a bad idea
Bad
on
idea.
digital marketing.
You have to know that you can't measure a lot of marketing. I know this was true. Like, I think that marketers and founders and people who built businesses in the 20th century fundamentally understood that much of marketing was a creative endeavor that was hard or impossible to measure. And they would make those investments anyway with lift-based measurement, right? The Coca-Cola billboard campaign we were talking about. You can't prove that putting up the billboard in San Francisco actually drove same-store sales to increase. Maybe you got more mentions on the radio. Like, you can't control for it. Maybe Coca-Cola, whatever, some hot dog brand became popular and it turns out that people love that with Coke. Whatever it is, you can't control for it. You can't perfectly attribute it. But if you are investing based on this idea that you have perfect knowledge and perfect measurement, you are now making worse mistakes than a lift-based, at least in a lift-based measurement system. Imagine that San Francisco billboard did nothing for you. At least your sales are still going up. The problem is if things go down and you over-optimize and over-index and invest in channels that appear to send you traffic, but not the ones that are actually driving the business, not only are sales still going down, but you're investing in the wrong thing.
And you're losing money the worst way.
The worst.
Excellent. All right, let me shift topics a bit because we've delved deep into some marketing geekery, which I love. But I think you'll also, one of the things I know you best for is Lost in a Founder.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
And the very open book about the challenges you faced, both the business and the personal struggles you went through to build, scale, succeed, and ultimately leave from Moz.com. As a founder is building, there's two tracks people come through, right? You bootstrap, you take VC money. Both have their benefits, both have their negatives. You've done both now. What do you find is good about either, and what do you find is worrying about either?
Let's see. I think certain founders, certain companies, and certain market segments are good places to invest venture capital style funds. A founder who is preferably already wealthy. And I say that not because I only want the rich to get richer, although VC is an asset class designed to make rich people richer, not an asset class designed to lift up.
Make founders richer. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, it's not designed for that, and it's not designed to lift up a large number of companies, right? The idea is build a monopoly in a sector, control the market. 99 investments will fail, one will succeed and make up for the losses of all the others. A few founders will become very rich. The investors will become richer, and the majority of investments in companies will fail and have a bad time and make less than they would have on the open market doing whatever they were going to do in their field. So that model is okay, I think, as a founder, if you're already wealthy and you can essentially, you're like, hey, I want to take a 1 in 100 shot at going from a millionaire to a billionaire. Okay, like that. I get it. That's your thing. But knowing that 99% failure rate, I think it's more like 97%, but you should go in with your eyes open. I would also say the type of company, there are many businesses that have the potential to do similar things to a venture-backed business that still don't require venture capital, but no other kinds of capital are marketed to those companies.
Oh.
So software as a service is a great example, especially self-service SaaS, even lower sales requiring investment enterprise style SaaS. It's not that you can bootstrap them. You still need a few $1 million to get off the ground. But once you get the engine going, you don't need to raise tens or hundreds of millions of more dollars, right? We're not talking about climate tech or pharmaceuticals and biotech. We're not talking about like clean energy. We're not talking about massive real estate plays, right? All of those industrial or manufacturing, like all of those require massive capital investments over and over again, right? Whatever Rivian wants to build a new series of automobiles, they're going to need a new factory. They need hundreds of millions of dollars to invest. Like venture makes a lot of sense, right? That's the kind of thing. Or public markets, right? Those are good financing models for those types of businesses. But a lot of people went into software because they like the software margins. And then they got lured into the venture capital ecosystem, which is not an ideal match because you can build $100 million, billion-dollar scale software companies, if that's your aim, and certainly tens of millions of dollars in revenue software businesses without that funding. And I'd point out that the funding, it will make you sloppy. There's no doubt about it. It will make you experimental, which can be good, right? Like you'll try a bunch of things, some will work, some won't. We did that at Moz for sure. But I also probably threw away $20, $25 million at things that if it were my money running that business, I would never invest in those things. I'd be much more careful and thoughtful. And the business would have been much more efficient as a result, and probably more customer centric as a result too. And then the third one is market, right? There's some market spaces that will blow up and explode. And there's some market spaces that won't. And if you are AI is one of these ones where like VCs know that the market space is going to explode. So tons of dollars are pouring into it, going to a lot of companies that probably don't need the capital and certainly don't need it in that structure. 99 of them are going to fail for every one that succeeds. You got to know all three of those.
Okay, I get that. So when you're bootstrapping, what are the upsides and the downsides to growing that way instead?
I hate bootstrapping. I think it's the worst.
Okay.
Again, no, I really do. Here's why. The stress is so insane. It's so ludicrously difficult, unless you're wealthy, to build a company where every dollar that you're spending is like a personal dollar, and all the time that you're spending is time that you could have been doing other things. This is why, Trevor, it was so critical for me. When I left Moz, I did not have enough money to start SparkToro on my own. I could not have gotten it off the ground. I didn't want venture. I obviously couldn't, I'm not going to get an SBA loan. Like they're never going to give a software entrepreneur that. There should be something in the middle. Why is there nothing in the middle of bootstrap or with credit card debt and whatever, which we did for Moz in the early days, and it was horrible, and debt collectors came after me, and it's just your life is hell.
I bootstrapped Crowdtamers. We had a real bad year last year, and I went from $770K in 2022 to 108.
Oh my God.
I had to fire 3 people. I had $97,000 in credit card debt, which I ended up rolling into a consolidated loan. I've now mostly finished paying all that off.
Jesus,
because this year was way better. But I got an ulcer and gained 30 pounds in 2023. I wonder why.
Exactly. Every night is just hell, all right? You're trying to go to sleep and you can't. And yeah, it just weighs on you. I'm so sorry you went through that, but yeah, that's it. It's true. So I can see why Lost and Founder resonated, because the first 3 chapters are essentially like exactly that story.
Yes. And I was reading it during the time that I realized everything had gone wrong in my business. I didn't even know for the first 6 months. I'm just like, I'm not earning as much as I used to. That's weird. And then I realized at some point, I'm like, I've earned less money every month than I did the last month before for 5 months. Oh, crap. Something's wrong.
Yeah.
Also, why was I too dumb to notice before now?
It's hard.
I mean, part of it is it started in October of 2022 when you got the holidays and things are down anyway. And so you can explain it away until it's March and you're like, why is revenue still down?
That's right.
So there's lesson learned for me. I'm sure I'll have to relearn it, because everyone has to relearn their lessons multiple times, but that was real tough. And so reading Lost and Founder and seeing somebody else who's been there, done it, lived it, got through, like that was heartening to read.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. So I wish with Lost and Founder that I could have ended the book with, hey, here's this other thing. Like, here's how,
right.
Basically, I took all those painful lessons and this ridiculous binary between bootstrapping and venture and made something in the middle that is a good fit for many people who want to build profitable, long-term, long-lasting, but lower risk businesses that have sort of higher odds, hopefully similar to average small business rate survival odds, which are in the 50% range, as opposed to venture, which is in the 2-3% range. And companies like the ones you and I have. Yeah. And so for SparkToro, we raised $1.3 million from 35 angel investors, checks of $10,000 to $100,000 each. And a few years after we raised money from them, we paid them back that money from the profits of the business. And now everybody participates in profit sharing pro rata, according to their ownership in the company, which is a great model. We just did the same thing for Snackbar Studio. We raised 2.15 for Snackbar Studio from 38 angel investors, no funds, no institutional money, no venture, right? Just individual people. Turns out that more than 15% of all Americans are technically accredited investors. And some people who have high salaries, because I think accredited investor is you make more than $200,000 a year, or you have $1 million in assets outside of your primary residence. You don't have to apply for anything. You don't have to do any paperwork. You're an accredited investor if you meet either of those standards.
Yeah.
And so we had a bunch of those people in our network, and we raised from that. It was actually delightful. One of the things that you learn, Trevor, is you're like, oh, I didn't know you guys were doing so well. Like, we emailed some friends and they were like, hey, we want to come in. And I was like, oh, here's the accredited investor requirements. They're like, great, no problem. We'll sign the docs. I'm like, oh my God, I'm so thrilled that you guys are like doing financially well and can throw $25,000 into Snackbar Studio, whatever it is. And that funding model is what allowed us to get SparkToro off the ground. And it's what's allowing us to make our first game at Snackbar Studio. And it is just a blessing to be able to raise money in a fashion that enables you to sleep a lot better at night, not stress about, hey, we had 3 down months. Okay, well, we got to turn around in the next 9. That's a very different thing than, oh my God, I have to get a loan. I have to fire people. I have to,
So interesting. At Crowd Tamers, I view my employees are actually my shareholders. I profit share to them.
Oh, cool.
And they get 28% of the top line revenue out, like after I've paid salaries and things. So I guess EBITDA revenue, they get 28% of that paid back to them.
Cool.
And we had 18 months where no one got any.
Right.
But we've turned it around now. We're back there because with bootstrapping and we're seeing how much my team contributes to, like, I'm not doing most of the work in this company. Well, there's 9 of us. I can't do most of the work anymore.
Yeah.
They need something more than just a salary, I feel like, to be like, hey, you're making us succeed. There, go, grow.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. I love it. So I think that rewarding the people who put in the labor and take the risk on the business is a wonderful thing, right? And that's what the Snackbar model and the SparkToro model do. And I will say, for anyone who's listening, that sounds nice, but complicated. It's not that complicated. And SparkToro is an LLC. So if you like LLCs for your tax reasons, we have open sourced our documents. If you search for SparkToro funding, you will find the documents open sourced in a Google Drive. You can use them for your own fundraising activities, partnership agreement, all of that is in there.
Oh, that's cool.
And the same thing is true if you want to build a C Corp, which is what Snackbar Studio is. We've open sourced all those documents. They are in a Google Drive as well. You can search for Snackbar Studio funding. Each of these, by open sourcing them, hopefully will save you 10, 15 grand on lawyer fees.
Bunch of money.
Yeah, so that you can do it. And a number of people have local hardware company here in Seattle, Ultrasonics, raised money using the SparkToro documents and a Tiny Seed fund, which Tiny Seed is an investor. They use the SparkToro model for all of their investments. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah, if you're a micro SaaS business looking to build a sort of bigger SaaS company, you can get funding from Tiny Seed, apply for funding, and they have a system for that. So this is what I hope, right? Like, I hope at the end of my career, I look back and I'm like, I built these companies, that was nice. But also we innovated this funding model. And because we were able to have some success and talk about it and open source these things, hundreds or thousands of other entrepreneurs that wouldn't have been able to start businesses and thousands of investors who could never make the venture model work for them were able to build things and launch them and make money and build teams and companies and families because of it. That would make me really happy at the end of however long I've got.
That's awesome. My mission I've given myself is help 1,000 founders make $1 million a year, because the system I use for marketing is very dependable. As I teach it to folks, they're like, this works, cool, let's go. It's the same idea, right? I don't know what a good business will be, but I bet you if I help 1,000 founders make $1 million, some of them will build something incredible.
There's these 2 philosophies in life, right? There's the I succeeded, pull up the ladder behind me, right? No one's college debt should be forgiven because I had to pay for college. Right. No one should get help with their housing costs because I worked 2 jobs and bought my house. No one should be able to come across this border because I came across that border, but it was really hard for me, whatever it is. And there's that philosophy in life. And then there's the opposite philosophy, which is I succeeded by climbing up this unscalable mountain. How do I build a ladder? How do I build a staircase? How do I turn a staircase into an escalator? How do I turn an escalator into an elevator, right? Like, how do I make it so that it is easier for the people coming up behind me rather than harder? And I think it's very obvious which of these is more ethical, which one's more rewarding, which one is the correct choice for every human being. And it breaks my heart when I see people thinking otherwise.
I feel you. Well, let me ask one last question to round this out. Other than Lost and Founder, what is a book that you think every founder should read, fiction or nonfiction, because it teaches something they need to know?
And if I could cheat, I would tell you to read Kurt Vonnegut's catalog.
The whole catalog?
Yeah,
I've read Slaughterhouse-Five, but
you could pick 4 or 5 of his books, right? But I think Slaughterhouse-Five is a great start. But what Vonnegut teaches above all else, I think, what kindness looks like and what the inverse looks like. And I think that is something that more so than any company that you'll build, than any money that you'll make, that is what makes humanity and life worth living.
Excellent. Thank you so much for your time today, Rand. I think I'll leave it at that. That's a heck of a good colophon to end on. And anybody who wants to get more insights from Rand, where do we find you online?
Yeah, so I write regularly at SparkToro.com on the blog. We have an email newsletter that Amanda and I put together that talks about all sorts of digital marketing and audience research insights every 2 weeks. And I am now simultaneously quite active on LinkedIn, Threads, and Blue Sky. I historically used Twitter a lot, but no longer.
Yeah, not me either. I'm on Threads and LinkedIn mostly these days.
Threads and LinkedIn. Yeah, I like Threads. I like Blue Sky. They're both great. LinkedIn is probably where I post more of those videos and that kind of stuff. But it's interesting to see the social media ecosystem broadening again after contracting for so long.
Yeah, exactly. There's new people coming in. I'm in Mastodon too, but I only go there to post video game nonsense because I was in video game marketing for years and years. So.
Oh, you were? You should have led with that. So when are we going to talk video game marketing for Snackbar?
Oh, that's a good question. I was head of marketing for a little company called Good Old Games, owned by CD Projekt Red, who makes The Witcher.
Yeah.
And one of the random facts I like to lead with that doesn't sound believable about me is, despite being profoundly hearing impaired, I have sold more musical albums than Beyonce because I'm on the Witcher 3 soundtrack, which went platinum 52 times.
Holy.
So
it's correct. That is absolutely wild. All right. We're going to have to catch up about that because I have a million questions about video game marketing. It's so different from other kinds of marketing.
B2B.
Yeah. What a wonderful coincidence that we get to meet and hang out. And thank you again for having me. This was really a wonderful conversation and wide ranging, but I hope helpful to a lot of founders.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Rand. And everybody else who's listening, I'll see you next week.